Hey Micronation, so I want to walk you through Chapter 14. Again, in microeconomics, Chapter 14 or Chapter 13 through 17 are really important. So I want you to go ahead and print out the student worksheets. There is a lot of information to cover in Chapter 14. I'm going to try and make it as riveting as I can, but try and stay with me as we walk you through some of these really important concepts. So the front page here is just to give you a big picture idea of what we're learning. So chapter 13 through 17. Again, this is about 80% of microeconomics are these 5 core chapters. And I would argue that these 5 chapters are the most important things that you can know in business, along with, I would say, accounting. So again, for chapter 13, number one, the background information you have to have is basic accounting. So you need to know what your income statement is. You should have a general idea of the balance sheet, but mainly the income statement. Again, hopefully at this point you know your income statement is your revenue minus expenses equals net income, profit, or earnings. Now the expense portion on your income statement is really covered in Chapter 13. We talked about Chapter 13. We talked in detail about your fixed cost and your variable cost, and those important costs and expenses and how that determines a lot of the important decisions you're going to make while you're successful entrepreneurs and you're making millions and billions of dollars running your business. So again, your fixed costs don't change with production, your variable costs do change with production, and all those variables we talked about. Now the more difficult problem we have is based on your business is the revenue portion. Now remember, revenue is the component of price of your product times the quantity that you sell. So both of those dynamics, price and quantity, which we talked about in Chapter 4, you have the law of demand, those considerations. But the revenue portion is going to be explained more detail in Chapter 14, 15, 16, and 17. Chapter 14, which I'm covering right now, is called Perfect Competition. Some textbooks call it Pure Competition. And basically this chapter, really what I want you to think of for this chapter is like a farmer, where a farmer is selling what's called a commodity type of product. So basically you're selling something that you can't differentiate. So you have to take what's called, you're a price taker. You have to take the market price for whatever the market's charge you. And I'm going to establish that you can't charge a different price, otherwise you won't have any customers. So you're called, in microeconomics, you're called a price taker. Now that's chapter 14. Now, Chapter 14, you can increase quantity, but you can't influence price. And the other thing you can do as well is try and minimize your cost, which we talked about in Chapter 13. All right, the next chapters after that we're going to cover, Chapter 15, 16, and 17. There's these other type of firms, obviously a monopoly. Most of you probably heard of that, where one firm controls that market. Chapter 16, monopolistically competitive. That's probably a term you never heard of. We'll cover that in greater detail. And then chapter 17 is oligopoly, and we get into game theory and all that. All right, so chapter 14, some of the key things that we want to make business decisions on. What price should I charge? How many workers should I hire? How much should I produce? So those types of things are the things that we want to answer in this chapter. All right. So one thing I ask myself as a business person is, who's more important? Is it the CEO? Is it the founder? Is it the manager? Or is it really the industry or the business or the product that you're selling? So for instance, for Amazon, is Jeff Bezos the most important key aspect of that business? Is Amazon successful because of Jeff Bezos? Or is it the business that he's in that makes it successful? So Amazon's a good example of, he was originally just selling used books. Now, used books is a classic pure competition where people really only care about what when you buy a used book. They only care about the price. So he's selling a commodity product. So really, he became really important as far as executing on that sale. Now, if it was an apples to apples comparison, if he had a stand and he was selling used books, and I had a stand and selling used books, chances are neither, the customer doesn't care about who's selling the product. They just care about what price they're going to get. So let's go ahead and look at this example down here. And this is usually an example I do in my face-to-face classes. So do you think you're the most important aspect of your business? Do you think you're a good salesperson? So typically in my face-to-face class, I ask 4 students to volunteer. Usually ask the males that are really egotistical and they think that they're the best salesperson. If I gave them a pen, they could sell this pen to anyone. So I know you've probably heard of that interview pitch, sell me this pen. So I have 5 students here, hypothetically. So we have our 5 students here, and I'm going to I don't want to be at a desk and I don't want a desk job. So I'm going to start my farm. My farm obviously is Coca Farm, and obviously I'm going to buy a cow. So I'm going to have this cow on my farm, E-I-E-I-O, and I'm going to produce milk. So basically this cow is going to produce milk, and then I'm going to sell the milk, and I want to be a farmer working on this farm. So I hire these 4 students to work on my farm, and they're great salespeople, and I'm ideally want them to go out and sell this milk for me. All right, so they can charge whatever they want for the milk. Their goal is to maximize profit. All right, and then the milk is going to go on the store shelf, and they're going to sell it. So whatever price they charge, it's up to them. I'm going to charge them $1 per container of milk. So that's my cost. I make that profit no matter what. If they could sell the milk for $5, $10, $20, that's up to them. All right. So what I ask the students and what I ask these salespeople, I want them to tell me what price they're going to charge, and then they're going to go ahead and put my milk on the store counter, and we'll see how much store shelf and see how much they sell it for. All right. So there's our milk down there. Here's my 4 students: Mandy, Randy, Sandy, and Danny. So they can charge whatever price they want. So that's week 1. Usually in my face-to-face class, I ask students to come up with a price, and then whoever isn't a salesperson, the other students of the class, get to choose who they're going to buy their milk from. All right. So here's the first week of prices. Mandy says she's going to charge $3.50 for the milk. She may Google the milk and see what price a typical container is selling for. Randy decides to sell for $2.50. Sandy decides to sell hers for $2.99. And Danny, he wants to maximize profit. He's confident he could sell his for $5. So he goes and puts it in the supermarket. Maybe Danny's even standing there trying to sell his milk. And here's the results. All right, so Mandy sells 2 gallons of milk. Now, typically when I do this in my face-to-face class, the 2 students that choose to buy from the student, they're usually friends with the student, and they decide to buy for $3.50 just because they want to help their friend out. Now, typically, maybe that's the case. Maybe Mandy also. You see this in the insurance business, where insurance companies they hire young people like yourselves, and then they go out and the people go to their family and relatives and friends trying to sell insurance, and usually the only reason people buy from them is because they're family or friends. But insurance is a good example, where life insurance per se, where that's just a commodity product, and people usually just care about what price they're charging for the premium. All right, so Mandy has 2 gallons that she sold. Randy over here sold 25. Let's say I have a class of 30 students. Sandy only sold 1 gallon of milk, and Danny over here, he said he was going to sell a lot at $5. He didn't sell any gallons of milk. All right. So typically, what happens? What could you hypothesize would happen here? I've done this in my face-to-face classes, and when I originally did this, I had some students just I let them try and pitch their milk, and everyone in the class has the information that knows that milk has come from that 1 cow on my farm. There's nothing different about the milk. So this is a typical salesperson, where Danny, per se, they start to kind of make up things and even get to a point where they kind of lie about their product. And that could be deceptive marketing, and that could technically be illegal. So technically, based on the milk, what do people really care about? The only thing they care about is the price of the milk. So Randy sold his for $2.50. He had the lowest price, so he got the most customers. The revenue would be 25 times $2.50. You get $62.50. The cost is, again, $1 per gallon of milk. So that goes to me at $25, and the profit for Randy is $37.50. So week 2, I let these students or these salespeople redeem themselves So I let them reprice their milk to try and increase the profit. Obviously, Danny hasn't made anything, and I'm kind of egging him on to redeem himself because he was the key salesperson. So they go ahead and reprice. So Mandy goes at $2.99. Randy is at $2.50. Sandy drops hers to $1.99, and Danny drops it down to $3.50. All right, so if this is the real world and they put their milk on the shelves and everyone sees that the milk is pretty much the same, who's going to sell the most milk? So obviously Sandy sold the most because she had the lower price. All Randy's loyal customers decided to leave him and go and buy from Sandy. All right, so she sold 26. Again, maybe Randy is able to hold on to one customer and say, please don't leave me. I've been good to you. Please stay with my product. So again, what's the key point I'm trying to learn here? Mainly, the only thing people care about, milk is a commodity product. You can't differentiate it. So in business, hopefully you've heard about that differentiation. You can't differentiate it. When someone goes to the grocery store, they don't care about the brand of the milk. They don't care about anything except for the price of the milk. Everyone generally views milk as the same quality. So it's really just what's called in microeconomics, you're a price taker. So if I kept doing this over and over again, let's say next week, the third week, I let these guys reprice their product and they're competing against here. What could you hypothesize that the price is ultimately going to get to? All right, so I'll let you think about that for a second. Hopefully every once in a while in my classes, I have some students that come up with the answer. It's going to get to $1. It's going to be pushed all the way down to $1. So eventually each one of these people, now this is called the zero economic profit condition. That dollar is going to cover their salaries, but ultimately that competition, and if it's a commodity product, is going to be pushed all the way down to $1. And again, this is called zero economic profit, not accounting profit. So they are actually making enough money to cover their own income, but this is called the zero profit condition. So when you have a commodity product, and that's what we're learning in here, so the farmer that's selling milk, corn, apples, etc., they're not able to get any extra profit because people only care about price, and if there's a lot of competition in there, it's going to keep pushing the price down towards the cost, and it's going to squeeze out all the profits there. So again, here you see the revenue is $30, the cost is $30, and then there's zero economic profit. Again, this is a very important concept for this chapter. It's called the zero economic profit condition. All right. So let's fill in this next page. What are the characteristics of perfect competition? Well, there has to be a lot of buyers and sellers. So there's hundreds, if not thousands, of buyers. So again, we probably want to think about the farmer here. As far as apples or milk, there's a lot of consumers of apples and milk, and there's a lot of farmers selling the product. Typically, the good is what's called a raw material or commodity. So milk is something that you can't differentiate. There's nothing that you can do to really, for instance, we'll talk about Nike sneakers where they have brand, and I'll kind of allude to monopolistically competitive type of companies. They have brands like Nike and Starbucks where you can differentiate your product and charge a higher price. Milk is something that can't be differentiated. It's considered a commodity or a raw material. Firms, it's usually low barriers to entry, so that means companies can easily start that business or exit that business. Usually I ask students, can you start the business? That means there's low barriers to entry, all right? So Warren Buffett talks about low barriers to entry. Low barriers to entry is typically, again, how hard it is for you to start the business. So a company that has low barriers to entry is typically like a loan company, a pizza cleaners, t-shirt companies, even a laborer is really low barriers to entry. It's not very difficult for you to start. Now, those are the businesses you don't want to start. You don't want the easier it is for you to start a business, the most likely you don't want to start that business because that means that it's easy for other people to copy your business. So you want to have high barriers to entry. You don't want to have low barriers to entry. A water company has high barriers to entry. Why is that? Because you have to lay all the pipe, you have to dig up the ground, dig up the roads, lay all that pipe, run it into someone's house. So all that infrastructure is high barriers to entry. Apple, the iPhone, the iPad, which I have here, very high barriers to entry. Again, there's technology involved with those companies. So it's not easy to start. And I wish I could start an iPhone business, but clearly based on that technology, the engineering, manufacturing, that causes the barrier. Sometimes financial firms have high barriers, etc. Even you could think about your own occupation. A lot of students ask me, what major should I be in? Well, if you're a CPA, a certified public accountant, it's very difficult to get that certification. So obviously it's hard for you to get, but if you get it, it's valuable because other people don't have it. And if you want to be an accountant, you want to have a CPA. So even though it's kind of sucks to work really hard and get these degrees, when you get these more difficult degrees, you're actually reducing the supply of that labor, which gives you more earnings power. So that's the same thing with a CFA, certified financial analyst, a medical doctor, even teachers would have to be certified. Everyone can't do it. So certifications are a possibility of a barrier to entry into certain careers. All right, barriers to exit. That's how easy it is to shut down a business. If I had my business out of my house, is it very difficult for me to shut that business down? No, I basically could close it down tomorrow. Now, some firms have high barriers to exit. So for instance, like an insurance company, they have contracts, and some insurance companies have contracts that are for decades. So it's not easy for them to close that business, all right? All right, so I'm going to stop that there, and I'm going to record our financial statements for Chapter 14 down below here in the next video.